The NFC North champion Detroit Lions are preparing to take on Josh Allen and company this coming fall. What is the state of their roster and how do the Bills match up as things stand today? Let's talk about it. You're watching Buffalo Live. Hello everyone, welcome to Buffalo Live, your one-stop shop for live professional play-by-play reaction to every Buffalo Bills game this coming season, plus talk on every single Buffalo Bills opponent this 2024 NFL season, including the Detroit Lions. I'm your host, Kyle, and on today's show, we will be breaking down this Lions team. We're resuming our series on the Bills' schedule. We've already taken a look at the Kansas City Chiefs, the Baltimore Ravens. Today we are looking at the Lions, in which they're playing this game at Detroit. After that, we'll take a look at the AFC South, then the NFC West, and then finally, as the season's getting ready to start, we'll do the AFC East. Grateful to have you guys joining us today, and without further ado, let's talk about the Detroit Lions. Sean McDermott's head coaching record. He's only played the Lions, matched up against the Lions twice since he's been the head coach of the Buffalo Bills. He's won both games. The last matchup, if you remember, was a Thanksgiving game 2 seasons ago in which the Bills won 28-25 in a back-and-forth game. This was the second game in Detroit within the 5 days. If you remember, there was snow in Buffalo. The game gets rescheduled between the Cleveland Browns and the Bills. They go to Detroit, and then the Bills turn around and play the Lions there in that same building. Ed Oliver gets a safety in this game. Von Miller tears his ACL on Thanksgiving, and there's a 13 seconds-esque ending to this game in the fourth quarter in which the Bills start their drive with 23 seconds left and immediately hit a deep shot to Diggs right down the middle of the field. Tyler Bass hits the 45-yard go-ahead field goal with 2 seconds left, and the Bills seal it. So that was the last matchup between these two teams. Now let's talk about the Lions last year, and let's start out with their offense. 27.1 points per game. That was 5th in the NFL, so a very successful offense. The Bills, by the way, were 6th in the NFL with 26.5 points average per game for the Bills offense. So very similar scoring offenses between these two teams. And this Detroit Lions team, as I watched the film and analyzed the numbers, it's so funny how similar they look and feel to the Miami Dolphins. You know, both are kind of like fast-paced orchestras. 2,147 yards after catch. That was third most in the NFL. Miami was second most. 135.9 rushing yards per game. That was 5th most. Miami was 6th most. 27 rushing touchdowns. That was tied for first with Miami. 151 play-action attempts. That was highest in the NFL. Miami, second most. This was not a team that pushed the ball deep. If you look at their intended air yards per pass attempt numbers, Jared Goff averaged only 6.7 air yards per pass attempt. That was 27th most in the league. So not a quarterback that really is pushing the ball down the field. And FYI, Josh Allen is third most in that category. Josh Allen, on average, threw the ball 8.7 yards past the line of scrimmage. So just a FYI there. And these similarities between them and the Dolphins made me want to look at both the GM and their offensive coordinator, Ben Johnson, and I didn't see any relation to the Shanahan-McDaniel system. The name of the GM escapes me right now, but I know he came from the LA Rams and Sean McVay, so maybe there's some personnel philosophy there, but in terms of the offensive coordinator, Dan Campbell, I don't really see any connection between the Shanahan system. And plus, I think the Lions didn't really run zone runs or zone play actions as much as the Shanahan system really does. but definitely a lot of play action in general. So let's talk about Jared Goff. Jared Goff was, in my opinion, one of the slowest quarterbacks in one of the fastest offenses. Again, reminds me of Tua, right? Fires from the pocket well. Lots of timing schemes that were just really successful for this team. Again, I want to go back to that yards after the catch number, third most in the NFL. 269.1 yards per game. That was third most among quarterbacks that played at least 8 games. And so Jared Goff definitely up there statistically with quarterbacks in the NFL last year. Very successful season. That's why he got paid the bag this offseason. And so we're going to keep going here. 67.3 completion percentage. That was sixth best in the NFL. 30 passing touchdowns. That was fourth most. His on-target percentage per Pro Football Reference was 80.3. That was fourth best. And so all those numbers, again, tell you this guy had a really great year. Again, I think what the Lions asked him to do was so brilliant in terms of just, hey, the most you're going to be running is a play-action pass. Other than that, fire the ball. He's got great velocity still for his age. And it's funny because at the tail end of his time with the Rams and kind of his first season with the Lions, I didn't study Jared Goff extensively, but I remember thinking to myself, man, I think this guy's really on the downhill. And, man, he proved me wrong. I think he proved a lot of people wrong, especially in this wild card playoff round against the LA Rams that he had. So, successful year for Goff. One thing to mention on him, 212 times he was blitzed. That was second most in the NFL. So I think teams knew how this offense operated in those short to intermediate routes and quick timing schemes, and they were hoping to manufacture pressures with blitzes. But yeah, let's continue on here with the skilled players. Let's start with the running back room. In my opinion, this is the best running back duo in the NFL. You've got David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. Let's start with Montgomery. 13 rushing touchdowns. That's tied for third most among running backs. 2.3 rushing yards averaged after contact. Fifth most in the NFL. He's a very north and south runner. And you can tell that by this next statistic. The average time behind line of scrimmage, 2.55 seconds. That was second quickest in the NFL. So not a guy who spends a whole lot of time in the backfield. I think that's also in large part due to the dives that the Lions would run with him, straight through the one hole or the two hole. Felt like Gibbs was more of the stretch running back they used. Speaking of Gibbs, 5.2 average yards. That was third most among running backs. By the way, James Cook was seventh. 2.5 rushing yards averaged after contact, so a little bit better than Montgomery. And Gibbs, in this statistic, was second best in the NFL. So a guy that was able to absorb contact and keep going. And again, that's primarily why I think this was the best running back duo. Again, I'll say those statistics one more time. The average rushing yards after contact. Montgomery, 2.3, fifth best. And Jahmyr Gibbs, 2.5, second best. Now, Gibbs did have a drop problem. He was second highest among all players in the NFL with a drop percentage of 11.3. And James Cook was third highest with 11.1% with drop percentage. So there's definitely similar players between Gibbs and Cook statistically. It definitely feels like Gibbs is more of a lateral guy. Cook feels more like a north and south runner, similar to Montgomery, but in different ways. So there's your running back room. The wide receiver room, definitely the highlight here, really, of the whole offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, first-team All-Pro, 1,515 yards last year. That was third most in the NFL. This guy is dominant. He's a great separator, especially in short to intermediate routes. He's not afraid of contact. He had the sixth highest snap percentage among all NFL wide receivers. This is a guy that the Lions just left on the field all game long. A guy they weren't afraid to use in some lead blocking schemes, which I love. So just such a bright spot, and I think it's somewhere the Bills will have to leverage wherever he's on the field. I think that whether it's Mike Edwards, whether it's Taylor Rapp or Cole Bishop, I'd have that safety kind of spying on his side of the field and maybe tell Rasul Douglas, hey, man, I got the inside. Let's try to double team this guy. Because beyond him in the wide receiver room, you've got Josh Reynolds leaving to Denver in free agency. And he was a good player for the Lions, I would say. He averaged 15.2 yards per catch. That was 18th deepest in the NFL, so he was kind of the deep shot guy. And but he leaves, and so the Lions are really trusting their first-round pick from a few years ago, Jameson Williams, to be that guy in his absence. He's averaged 14.8 yards per reception on just 40 receptions. He's missed a lot of games, only played 18 games in the past 2 seasons, only averaging 21.9 yards per game. Not great. And so, again, to start off his career, before his career in the NFL, he tore his ACL in the 2022 College Football Championship game. And then, in 2023, he violates the gambling policy and suspended, consequently, 4 games. So the Lions are really putting their faith in Williams. And besides him, you've got Kalif Raymond, who had a decent year with 489 yards last season. But I really do not like the depth beyond these guys. Traquan Smith, lots of playing time in New Orleans all those years and not much production. He couldn't find the field in Denver last year. Donovan Peoples-Jones is back on the team. He did some things 2 years ago in a bad Cleveland wide receiver room, really only Amari Cooper in that room. And beyond that, he hasn't really been successful. And then you've got Antoine Green, who I admittedly don't know a whole lot about. 7th-round pick out of UNC in the 2023 NFL Draft. So just not a whole lot of guys beyond Amon-Ra St. Brown. But you do have tight end Sam LaPorta, 2nd-team All-Pro last year, 889 yards. And when you're talking about Dalton Kincaid, unfortunately, this is the other guy you got to talk about in terms of rookie tight ends last year, because LaPorta, with those 889 yards, was 4th most for rookie tight ends in NFL history. Dalton Kincaid ends up 10th most in rookie tight end NFL history with 673 yards. So LaPorta with just over 200 more yards than Kincaid. And obviously Bills fans are pumped about the future of Dalton Kincaid. Well, imagine what Detroit Lions fans are feeling with this guy. 10 touchdowns last year for LaPorta. But I looked back at those touchdowns, and probably half of them, if not more, were coverage breakdowns. So I don't think teams were quite ready for this guy. And the Lions, man, they counted on LaPorta in tight windows, in trick plays, and 4th downs. I mean, this is a guy that really established himself and didn't really seem like a rookie. So definitely someone that, Taron Johnson's going to be matched up on. And then our linebackers, right, Milano and Bernard, hopefully won't have problems with him. Let's take a look at the offensive line. You got a great offensive line for the Detroit Lions, really headlined by tackle Penei Sewell, 1st-team All-Pro last year. And, you talk about, skill players who are dangerous in space. That's how I like to describe Penei Sewell as a blocker. He's dangerous in space. He handles a lot of creative game plans well in terms of pressure looks against him, and Jared Goff handles those well. He didn't miss an offensive snap last year. So this guy is incredible. Love Penei Sewell. Graham Glasgow as the guard there, played 90% of the snaps. Frank Ragnow, one of my favorite centers in the NFL. He was 2nd-team All-Pro last year. And then I'll go to this next guard. You lose Jonah Jackson to free agency. He goes to the Rams, and they replace him with Kevin Zeitler from Baltimore, who has started in every game he has appeared in over the last 3 seasons. So he's only missed 4 games. Has been a guy that his offense has counted on for the past 3 seasons. So I don't think there should be a big drop-off there. The Ravens had a great run offense and did a decent job at protecting Lamar last year. And then beside him, you'll have offensive tackle Taylor Decker. So it feels like this offensive line is fortified, not really any tomato cans, and especially in a quick offense, the Bills are going to have to bring creative looks to manufacture pressure. So that's going to look like Terrell Bernard blitzes, Taron Johnson blitzes, maybe some Cole Bishop blitzes, and things like that. You know, some switches going on in the defensive line. So that's what the Bills are going to have to do in order to generate pressure against a quick offense. Okay, now let's shift to the defense. 23.2 points allowed. That was 23rd in the NFL. So not great. Their yards per game, 336.1 yards allowed per game. That was 17th fewest, so just kind of a middling defense. 247.4 passing yards per game was the 6th worst. However, juxtapose that against their rushing defense, 88.8 rushing yards per game. That was 2nd best. So a pretty vulnerable team through the air, but a dominant team on the ground. 41 sacks, that was tied for 23rd in the NFL, and 187 pressures. That was number 1 in the NFL, and the reason being primarily is because of this guy, defensive end Aidan Hutchinson. I mean, this guy is incredible. Turn on the tape and you can see it. He's really that guy who, like a Max Crosby, right? Like a Nick Bosa, Joey Bosa, TJ Watt. He's really a guy that just stands out that you can kind of keep your eye on. 11.5 sacks last year. That was tied for 12th most in the NFL. Keep in mind, this is only his 2nd season in the NFL. And check this out. This is, to me, the most impressive stat. And before I break it down for you here, I just want to really highlight the importance of pressures over sacks. Sacks are undoubtedly the sexiest stat for NFL analysts, right? But I really think that it's an overrated stat because I think a lot of guys kind of can end up in sacks, right? If there's a guy like Max Crosby who commands so much attention, then their defensive tackles and maybe the other edge rusher on the other side are able to get to the quarterback. Whereas pressures, I think, are more of an honest stat. Pressures also, account for times when a defender gets in the face of a quarterback, forces an incompletion, pressures him out of the pocket. So I really love the pressure stat. And check this out. Aidan Hutchinson, 62 pressures, number 1 in the NFL. Now, who was 2nd most in the NFL, and how many pressures did they have? Well, TJ Watt was 2nd, and TJ Watt had 50 pressures, 12 fewer pressures than Aidan Hutchinson. How about on the team, right? Who was 2nd most on this Detroit Lions team? Alex Anzalone with just 17 pressures. Compare 17 pressures to 62. I mean, I'm not a math guy, but that's like triple the amount of pressures that the 2nd most productive player had on the team. So Hutchinson is creating a lot of pressure for this team. Single-handedly feels like 14 tackles for loss, not to mention that was 21st in the NFL. 3 forced fumbles. He had 3 interceptions last year, had another one this year. And by the way, you should check that interception out. Super crazy athletic. He lined up in the 3-tech a lot. For those of you who don't know what the 3-tech is, that's between the guard and tackle. So the Lions weren't afraid to kind of send him in some creative ways, kind of like the Bills do with Rasul. So this guy, he's got incredibly powerful hands, but I didn't want to stop short there. I would describe his arms, I wrote down here, his arms are built like legs. That's the kind of upper body that Hutchinson has, so strong. I think he'll be a perennial contender for Defensive Player of the Year. This is how good this guy is. So, but beyond that, you take a look at the rest of this team, and there's not much pressure going on elsewhere. The guy up front that generated the 2nd most pressure, defensive end Charles Harris, and he saw his contract expire. So that's not great, but that's really all I'm going to do in terms of talking about the defensive line. I think Hutchinson's such a bright spot. Other than that, I think they're going to have to really find some other guys to step up. The linebacker core blitzed quite a bit last year, but they struggled in pass coverage. Linebacker Alex Anzalone had 129 tackles. He did miss 22, which was tied for the most in the NFL. So if he cleans that up, he's one of the most productive tacklers in the league. But it felt like offenses really targeted the will linebacker most, whether that was rookie Jack Campbell out of Iowa or Derek Barnes. And I can kind of go through those numbers with you here. Jack Campbell, when targeted, he gave up an 80.6% completion percentage. That was 17th worst among all defenders in the NFL. And in terms of passer rating when targeted, 128.2 passer rating. That was 13th worst in the NFL. Now you take a look at Derek Barnes, 74.3% completion percentage when targeted. That was 61st worst, so not as bad as Campbell, but definitely not great. And so offenses definitely targeted this will linebacker, whoever it was, and had some success. As far as the secondary goes, you have another bright spot back there in nickel corner Brian Branch, second-round pick last year. The Lions traded up 3 spots to get him. 13 pass deflections, 3 interceptions, including a touchdown in that Week 1 game against the Chiefs. You've also got Kirby Joseph, the safety, back there with 4 interceptions, 11 pass deflections. And unfortunately for the Lions, they had to release cornerback Cam Sutton in March of this year after an arrest warrant was issued on him. And this was a year after he signed a 3-year, $33 million deal. He led the defense in snaps last season with over 1,000 snaps. That's crazy. But he did lead the NFL in receiving yards allowed on completions. 888 yards was how many yards Cam Sutton allowed when he was targeted. Not great. So what did the Lions do in response? Well, they traded up to draft cornerback Terrion Arnold out of Alabama with their 24th overall pick. I should say their first-round pick, the 24th overall pick. So they go back to the Alabama secondary bucket for Terrion Arnold after taking Brian Branch last year. And then they go back to the corner position again in the second round with cornerback Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri. Interesting thing about Rakestraw I found was Matt Miller out of ESPN compared him to Tre'Davious White. And then they also drafted safety / running back Sione Vaki out of Utah in the 4th round. So that's Cole Bishop's teammate. Those guys played a lot of safety together, but he also played running back, which is kind of cool. Cool to have a multi-positional athlete on the team. So the Lions seeking to invest in their secondary there. And so that's really all I wanted to add or say on these Detroit Lions team. I think the biggest bright spots are Sam LaPorta, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Penei Sewell, Brian Branch, and Aidan Hutchinson. I think those are those best players on this team. But in conclusion, I think they've got a physical offense. The Bills need to be great at play recognition, reacting, and tackling against this team. I'd run a lot of cover too. And the reason I say that is because if you look at Goff's numbers down the deep center of the field, they're not great relative to the rest of the team. You can look up that via Next Gen Stats. But definitely a team that excels at throwing the ball shallow, throwing the ball intermediate. And so that's what I would do. I'd kind of bring up the safeties a bit, make them try to throw over you, and just trust your safeties to play smart football, and just really emphasize tackling that week of practice. Defensively, the Lions are really going to seek to be better at generating pressure outside of Aidan Hutchinson. I would slide protection his way, whether that's Ray Davis chipping him or Dawson Knox, really focusing on getting him a step off of his pass rush plan. And then the Lions are definitely going to want better coverage out of their linebackers in general. They're going to want someone to come in for Cam Sutton and hopefully play better than he did. But I would be targeting that wheel linebacker if I'm the Bills. And, really just test their pass coverage, which wasn't great last year. So that's going to do it for this edition of Buffalo Live. Thank you so much for watching. I'm curious, what scares you about this Detroit Lions team? And where can the Bills take advantage? Let me know in the comments below. Coming soon, we've got an episode where I break down, I want to say, the Sean McDermott's favorite offensive play last year, given how much they ran it and how much success they had with it. So I'm going to be taking you through that play. I've got a whiteboard over here. We're going to do the X's and O's thing, so that's going to be awesome. And for the next episode in this schedule series, we will break down the Jacksonville Jaguars, who the Bills will take on in Orchard Park. Again, if you enjoyed this video, like. If you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. Once again, I'm your host, Kyle. Thank you so much for watching. Go Bills, and God bless.